We got to find LK. So how do I find a missing side on a right triangle? Pythagorean theorem. We're going to do the quick way to do this. Which one of these is C? 34. So that means we'll have 16 squared, x squared, and 34 squared. 16 squared is? 34 squared, 1156. Subtract 256. X squared equals? So then x equals 30. So that's my missing side. We need to find the trig ratios from k. So let's start with sine of k. What's my hypotenuse in this picture? 34. My opposite?
16.
And then my adjacent? 30. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so opposite is over 34. Does this reduce? It does. Perfect. Cosine from k would be adjacent over hypotenuse, so 30 over 34, which reduces to? Perfect. Last is tangent. Tank would be opposite over adjacent, so 16 over 30, which reduces to? Perfect. Sweet. So you're going to find today we're not really learning a lot of new stuff. We're just taking all that we've learned from this chapter and putting it on one triangle. If that makes sense. So this is still review. We haven't made it to the new lesson. It says solve for the missing side lengths. Can I use the Pythagorean theorem?
No.
I cannot because I don't have two sides, right? So what I need to use is a trig ratio. So in order to do that, I'm going to label all of my sides. So what's the hypotenuse here? 22. What's my opposite?
PR.
Yeah, PR is my opposite. So we're on this problem right here. And then my adjacent? RQ. Which one do we want to solve for first? PR. So we're going to use the opposite and the side they gave us, the hypotenuse. So which trig ratio is this going to be? Sine. From what angle?
37.
37 will equal the opposite, which we don't know. So we could call it x over the hypotenuse, which is 22. Do I need to flip this one? Nope, I'm just going to multiply both sides by 22 to cancel out my fraction. So 22 times sine of 37. 13.2. We'll do the tenths. Do not circle x. We made up x, didn't we? So we need to actually name it. What was the name of that side? PR. And the length of PR, so you just write PR with no line above it. That means length of equals 13.2. So PR equals 13.2. The next thing we want to find is the adjacent. So we're going to use the adjacent and the hypotenuse, the side they gave us. So which trig ratio does that involve? Cosine, good. From 37 equals the adjacent, we don't know. We could call it x. Over the hypotenuse, which is 22. Multiply both sides by 22. 17.6. So what was the name of that side? RQ. So the length of RQ is 17.6. So we'll pause for a second. So if you look at the title of this section, it says solving right triangles, which you're going to write up there in the title area. It's going to say solve the right triangle. This means find all missing sides and all missing angles. So up here where it says solving right triangles, it means find all missing sides and all missing angles. So at the top. Find all missing sides and all missing angles. Do I need to point it out to you? You're just writing it at the top. Find all missing sides and all missing angles. I can really tell we're alive today. Do we need to do jumping jacks?
No.
He's going to back to jumping jacks. So, here's the only difference between what we have done and what we're doing today. What we're doing today, you've already accomplished a problem looks like this. The only difference is the problem would say solve the right triangle. So find all missing sides. Did we find all the missing sides?
Yes.
We did, and then it would say find all the missing angles. So what is the only angle that's left?
P.
Angle P. So the only difference of today's lesson is we would find angle P. Make sense?
Oh.
And you know, what do you know about the three angles of a triangle?
I know angle A.
They add up to 180, so you already know how to do it. So that's what I'm saying. It's a lot of things coming together to solve a right triangle. Okay? Before we do that, we got one more. This was on the test. It was on the quiz. Determine which of the two acute angles has a sine of 0.4. What does acute mean? Less than 90. So is angle P going to be an answer?
No.
It is not. So it's either Q or R. So what we're going to do, we're going to find sine of Q and find sine of angle R and see which one equals 0.4. Mm-hmm. I just said that.
She did.
It's fine. So let's start with Q. Q would be opposite over hypotenuse, so sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So what is opposite of Q? 3 squared root of 21 over the hypotenuse, which is
15.
So go ahead in your calculator. So you're going to type what I have in green here. We want to know what that is in decimal form. So 3 squared root of 21 over 15. You'll want to hit S to D to make it a decimal. So this is... What do we get? Sorry. 0.9. Okay, so that one doesn't equal. So then let's see about sine of R. So from R, what would my opposite be? 6, and then my hypotenuse is still 15. So what is this as a decimal? 0.4. So which one of these angles has sine of 0.4? Angle R. So your answer would just be angle R. Did it work for you? All right. So we move on to kind of the new stuff, solving right triangles. Again, to solve a right triangle means to find all unknown side lengths and angle measures. You can do this. This is not on your page, so just relax. You can do this as long as you have one of the following. If you have two side lengths, which is what we're going to talk about today. We'll have two side lengths. You're able to find the third side length and all of the angles on the inside. Or if you're given one side length and one angle. We'll do that one tomorrow, okay, or Monday. We talked about inverse already. The inverse of tangent, if you say, let angle A be an acute angle. If tangent of angle A equals x, how would I get angle A by itself? What would I have to do to tangent? What's the opposite of tangent? It's written on the screen in yellow.
Inverse tangent.
I'd have to use the inverse tangent, which looks like tangent to the negative 1. So when do we use tangent to the negative 1 or cosine to the negative 1? To find an angle. So I'd write that at the top if you don't remember. To find missing angles, you're going to use the inverse. So again, it looks like sine negative 1, cosine negative 1, tangent negative 1. Will you ever use it to find the measure of a side length? No. Just an angle. So you have this top section. This is 6 of your classwork problems right here. Says let A, B, and C be acute angles. Use a calculator to approximate the measure of angle A, angle B, and angle C to the nearest tenth of the degree. So in letter A, tangent of angle A equals 0.75. So what we have tangent from an angle, because A represents an angle, and it equals 0.75. What is this to us? It is a decimal. What is it as a fraction?
3/4.
Okay, so if it was written like this, like we did on the first page, first question that we did today, what do we call this setup? A trig ratio. So they gave you a trig ratio, just in decimal form. So you've been setting these up since day 1, right, in this chapter? Yes? Okay. So we're going to solve for the angle. How do I get rid of tangent so I can solve for the angle? I'm going to use the inverse. So you're going to hit shift tangent, and this should pop up. Shift tangent, and you're going to type in 0.75. You don't really need a 0 there. What do we get rounded to the nearest tenth? 36.9. Make sure you know how to plug this in your calculator, because if you don't, you're going to struggle
That's
today.
what you're supposed to do in the test.
Yes,
Oh, that I did that.
for this question. All right, sine of angle B equals 0.87. So I want to get angle B by itself. I want to get rid of sine. So the inverse of sine is sine to negative 1. So shift sine of 0.87. We're up here. 60.5, cool. Letter C, cosine of C equals 0.15. We're going to use the inverse. Cosine to the negative 1 of 0.15. 81.4. Good. So that's new, not new information. We're going to apply this to a triangle. It says solve the right triangle. So when you're solving the right triangle, this means you're finding all sides and angles. All sides and angles. So the easiest one probably to find that a lot of people would start off with is, what would you like to find first? We can find a side. We have two sides. So Greg, how do I find the third side here? You are correct. Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So which one of these would be c?
X.
Yeah, x, the missing side. So we're going to say 20 squared plus 21 squared equals c squared. 20 squared is 400. 21 squared is, add them together, we get 841 equals c squared. Take the square root.
29.
Okay, so don't circle it like that with c. What was the name of that side? DE. So you'd say the length of DE equals 29. All that's left to find are my missing angles. So we're going to find the measure of angle D and also find the measure of angle E. I just wrote it all out right now because, well, I have 100 of these to grade every time you take a quiz or a test. So you need to box in your answers. If you don't box it in and I don't see it, I will not feel sorry for marking it wrong. Some people aren't circling their answers, okay? So there's 3 parts to this. So if you want to box it all in together, that would be super helpful. If you want to box it as you go, that's fine. But I'm boxing it so that I can have room on my screen. Which angle would you like to solve for first? Sure. Is that red? Okay. So can I use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for an angle? No. So what I'm going to use is a trig ratio. So I'm going to set up a trig ratio. Using the sides they gave me. I don't want to use the side I found because I could be wrong. What kind of side is 21?
Opposite.
And what kind of side is 20?
Adjacent.
So which trig ratio am I going to use?
Tangent.
Tangent. Tangent, we said, from angle D. Will equal the opposite, which is 21, over the adjacent, which is 20. So I'm looking for an angle. So how do I get rid of tangent if I'm looking for angle D? The inverse. So shift tangent, inverse of tangent of 21 over 20. We are rounding to the nearest tenth like the directions said. 46.4. So technically you could very easily find angle E without doing any trigonometry. But if you were wrong here, which one class, every single person was wrong, except for one. They all typed in many different things. What you want to do at the beginning at least is we're going to set up a new problem from angle E. And then what do we know about all of our angles? Which they add up to? They should add up to 180. Okay, so it's a good way to check yourself. So starting from angle E, what kind of side is 20?
Opposite.
It's now my opposite. And what kind of side is 21?
Adjacent.
Adjacent. So which trig ratio we're going to use? Tangent from angle E. And it equals the opposite, which is 20 over 21. Again, we're looking for an angle, so we will use the shift button. So shift tangent. What do we get?
43.6.
Perfect. Realistically, so this is the answer. How many degrees fit inside of a triangle? 180. How much is taken up by the right angle?
90.
So what's 180 minus 90? So what should these two angles add up to? They should add to 90. They do. Just so you know. All right, number 7. We're going to do the same thing. We can start with the side length. Which one of these is going to be C? 109. That was a big huff there, Andrew. That was a big huff. It's okay. All right, so we're going to say 91 squared.
I just can't breathe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Acid reflux plus a very bad sore throat is not a good
We didn't ask for
combination.
information.
I'm so sorry.
So rude.
I am recording, so thank you for...
You're welcome, YouTube.
91 squared is 8,281. 109 squared is 11,881. Okay.
We subtract it.
B squared equals
36,100.
3,600. It's a little bit of a difference. It's fine.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, and then so B equals
60.
60. So can I write B equals 60 and circle it? Nah.
GJ.
GJ. Terrible initials. GJ.
Imagine.
George Jacobs. That's not bad. George Jacobs.
Here we go. Moving on. So sorry. We need to find the measure of the angles. So measure of angle G. That's not a great name either. Measure of angle H. We're gonna find both of those. We need to find, or do we want to find angle G or angle H first? Sure. Wow, that was very. So what kind of side is 91?
Opposite.
Opposite. And then what kind of side is 109?
Hypotenuse.
So which trig ratio we're gonna use?
Sine.
Sine from G, sing, equals the opposite, 91, over the hypotenuse, 109. Get angle G by itself, we're going to use the inverse. So shift sine, 91 over 109.
56 basics.
Perfect. All right, and then from angle H, will 109 stop being my hypotenuse?
No.
Nah. What will 91 become?
Adjacent.
So which trig ratio is that?
Cosine.
Cosine? From, what do we say? H
Just like,
equals the adjacent, 91, over the hypotenuse, 109. Hold on. Use the inverse, shift cosine. I'm getting there.
What?
I'm getting there, y'all. Shift cosine of 91 over 109, and now we get,
33.4.
thank you. Whew.
We did it.
So you see at the bottom, you'll have two different pieces. It'll say sine of 33, and then sine of x equals 0.333. So this first one, you are given an angle. What is the angle in this? 33 degrees. So when you type this into your calculator, type it in as you see it, sine of 33. And then enters, equals, whatever. Well, let's round to the hundredth. What do we get?
5.4.
0.545? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. What you get out is a trig ratio. Trig ratio. Interesting. So when you're given the angle and you type this in, you're gonna pop out the trig ratio. This one, however, is what we're talking about today. What are we missing in this problem?
The angle.
The angle is missing. So anytime you're missing an angle, what do you need to use?
Inverse.
Use the inverse. So this time you're given the ratio. What's the ratio in this problem? 0.333. What is that equivalent to as a fraction? Yeah, it's 1/3. Anyway, so to get x by itself, you would use the inverse.
Oh, you would want us to do
No, you would just use whatever they gave you. All right, so what does that give me to the nearest tenth? 19.5. Ta-da! Good. All right, so I'm gonna give you your worksheet, and I'll tell you about it.